This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, February 7th. We will continue this morning with reading and commenting on my latest book, Finding Your Buddha Smile. The chapter we're going to look at today is a bit short, so I'd like to share a few odds and ends with you before we begin that. First is something to keep in mind every day. Right at the start of the day, the three general resolutions of Buddhist tradition, classic Buddhist tradition. Please keep these in mind. They are our essential guide. And this goes, do good, avoid evil, save the many beings. Please take that to heart every morning when you wake up. Do good, avoid evil, save the many beings. Put that into practice every day. It's a fundamental thing. Of course, Zen tradition takes hold of that quite directly. There's the famous dialogue of Po Chui, who was one of the great Tongara poets, governor of a province for a time, administrator, who came to see Bird's Nest Roshi, who was doing zazen up in a tree. That's why it was called Bird's Nest. They have a bit of a dialogue, and at one point, Po Chui asked Bird's Nest, what is the highest teaching of Buddha Dharma? Bird's Nest says, do good, avoid evil, save many beings. Po Chui says, even a child of 3 knows that. And Bird's Nest answered, that's true, yes. A child of 3 may know it, but a man of 70 can still find it hard to put it in practice. A man of 70 still finds it hard in practice. Please wake up every day with good, avoid evil, save many people. Our world really needs some. This is what we can do in our own small way. So that's one thing I'd like to share with you. Another was a lovely, got a card from someone in Toronto who I don't know, but who's a member of the Toronto Zen Center. It was quite moving. She wrote about, she's a student at the Toronto Zen Center. And I just wanted to leave a quick note thanking you so much for your work on finding your Buddha smile. I just finished it today, put it up on my shelf, then a moment later decided to start it again. It's helped my practice so much, and I think will continue. So those are certainly heartening words for any author to think that your book has actually helped someone, especially for a Zen author. I think your book has helped someone actually in their practice. So that was quite a lovely surprise to get. And then to conclude our little potpourri here, I want to read you a book that was gifted to me from my old friend, the poet Steve Sanfield, who died, it must be, 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago. Steve was actually Sasaki Roshi's first monk. He was the person who, he was very close friends and remained very close friends with Leonard Cohen throughout his life. And Steve was the person who actually brought Leonard Cohen to Sasaki Roshi to begin Zen practice. Steve lived up on the San Juan Ridge with Nelson Foster, Gary Snyder, and those people. But he left Zen to return to his Jewish roots and really committed to that very strongly. But he was a noted haiku poet, and we just kind of hit it off some years ago. We were both speaking at a conference in New York City, I think the American Library Association. I remember it because I was wearing a suit at the time, which is not something I do very often. and had shaved my beard and mustache and felt I was as close to incognito as I could be in my suit and shaved face. Steve recognized me. We had a great chat, and for whatever reason, we became very good friends, and he would send me all his books. This is from The Rain Begins Below, selected slightly longer poems, 1961 to 2005, Steve Sanfield. And there's an appreciation at the end of the book by both Wendell Berry and Leonard Cohen. So those were people he was close with. Also, Steve and I had a connection. I spent a lot of time in Zuni Pueblo. He actually, when he was younger, he was a bit older than me, spent time with the Hopi. So we had this background with Zen and Judaism and native culture of the Southwest and poetry. So this poem is called The Key to the Forest. I think you'll enjoy it. My first day on the job for the Forest Service, my supervisor gave me a key and told me to be careful with it. What's it for? I asked. It's the key to the forest. Later that afternoon, I was out in a pickup with my partner. We came to a closed gate. He told me to open it. But I saw it had a lock on it. Use your key, he said. I did. It worked. It was, in fact, the key to the forest. It was a master key for all the Forest Service locks. The next day, when I saw my supervisor, I asked him, how could you give me this key? You don't know me. You've hardly had time to read my resume. What are you going to steal? He asked. A river? What are you going to steal? A river? And this was related to Steve by a friend of his who was in the Forest Service, a guy named Bob Levine. He wrote that back in 92. But that's a kind of joy to me every time. So, nice to share it with you. So today we'll look at chapter 4 of Finding Your Buddha Smile. Te-shan carries his bundle. So if you remember, our first one was Te-shan carries his backpack. And he came to Ryutan and found out that in the end he could burn everything, backpack, lugging around all that time. So proud of him. Now, having had his deep opening with Ryutan, he heads off carrying his bundle. Let's take a look and see how that goes. Te-shan, that noted scholar of the Diamond Sutra, had set off with the intention of wiping out those Zen devils in the south. Falling into Master Lungtan's dragon pond, his candle blown out, he found his face before his parents were born. Out beyond the pages of his notes and commentaries, he awoke to the real Diamond. Deliriously happy, filled with joy, he burned his precious writings and set off, confident as ever, into a bright and shining new world. But is it so simple? Certainly this dramatic opening of Te-shan's Zen practice realization story presents an archetypal model. He started out with good ideas, but without a personal experience of what those concepts actually mean, he really didn't know what he was talking about. Remember, he was so lavish in his exposition on emptiness, such key to the Diamond Sutra. And then the old woman said, oh, Diamond Sutra, huh? Oh, doesn't it say something like past mind cannot be grasped, present mind cannot be grasped, future mind cannot be grasped? So then, Venerable Sir, with which mind will you take one of my mind refresher cakes? It was a big shot. And he went, duh? No conceptual understanding. It didn't really function. So that's how he ended up going to Bhutan, down the road. Anyway, Roshi Kapleau likened this ability to understand things and not realize them, to a child of three singing love songs. Child of three singing love songs. It's a really interesting metaphor, isn't it? Thinking of all the heartache and the grief and the longing, desire and the frustration. Great love songs, and there's you've got a child of three singing them. The words are all right, but something's not quite genuine about it, wouldn't you say? That's the point. Child of three singing love songs. This is a metaphor he received from one of his teachers, I believe. Even after his profound realization, a confirmation of all he believed, Te-shan was still, and here's the point, simply who he'd been. Whatever we may fantasize about enlightenment, even a deep experience is not the end point. It's a new beginning. Te-shan was on the road home, but not yet there. The road goes on and on. So, fresh off his realization, Te-shan set out to check himself against, or, if they lagged, correct the noted teachers of his time. Zen Master Jiaoshu famously said, "If I meet a child of 9 who can teach me, I'll learn from them. If I meet someone of 90 who can learn from me, I'll teach them." He was 60 when he first said it, having had an initial realization at 19 and full realization at 56. He didn't start formally teaching until the age of 80 and continued until his death at the venerable age of 120. Given the Confucian standards of his time, his willingness to be taught by a child or to teach an elder was startling. He had matured beyond his culture. Te-shan, on the other hand, was a young man and fresh off the mark. The second koan in our chronological sequence on the maturing life of Te-shan revealed what happened once he began checking himself against the best minds of his generation. It's from Allen Ginsberg. That quote, best mind. This is Blue Cliff Record Case 4. Te-shan carried his bundle. When Te-shan came to Quaishon's, that would be Isan in Japanese, temple, he carried his pilgrim's bundle with him into the Buddha Hall, where he crossed from east to west and from west to east. Quaishon sat quietly doing zazen. Looking around, Te-shan said, "Nothing, nothing," and went out. Shuedo, that would be Secha, Japanese, comments, completely exposed. Te-shan got to the monastery gate, but then said to himself, "I shouldn't be so crude." So he re-entered the hall in the prescribed manner for the meeting. As Quaishon sat there, Te-shan, holding up his kneeling cloth, said, "Master." Quaishon made as if to take up his ceremonial whisk, whereupon Te-shan shouted, "Cuts!" and left the sweep of his sleeve. Shuedo comments, complete. Te-shan, turning his back on the hall, put on his straw sandals and departed. That evening, Quaishon asked the head monk, "Where is that newcomer?" The head monk replied, "When he went out, he turned his back on the Buddha Hall, put on his straw sandals, and departed." Quaishon said, "Hereafter, that fellow will go to the summit of an isolated peak, establish a hermitage, and scold the Buddhas and abuse the patriarchs." Shuedo comments, adding frost to snow. Adding frost to snow. Why does Te-shan break with monastic convention by storming in, peering around, announcing nothing, nothing, and heading off again? All done while the noted teacher and monastery abbot Quaishon is sitting right there. Is Te-shan, like Jiaoshu, beyond convention, without need to conform to standards or courtesies, including those of the Zen world? Does Zen's freedom mean I'm free to do whatever I want? Back in the early 70s, a Zen friend, you might remember her, Marcy Wilkov, created a brilliant April Fool's edition of Zenbo, the Rochester Zen Center's publication, which was a simple newsletter back then. Beneath its title heading ran the banner line, "Mind of a Zen adept is taut like a drawn bow." A bowstring. Mind of a Zen adept is taut like a drawn bow. Our friend's one-issue joke magazine, titled Zen Bugle, boldly sported under its title the banner line, "The mind of a Zen adept is blown like a bugle." The mind of a Zen adept is blown like a bugle. Te-shan might have appreciated that. Yeah. To back up a bit, in our curriculum, Blue Cliff Record is the second book of koans we examine after Gateless Barrier. It's such a deeply poetic text that Dao Wei, dates are 1089 to 1163, the heir of Guan Wu, who created the Blue Cliff Record based on Shuida's, died in 1192, original compilation of 100 koans and verses, burned its printing blocks. Couldn't even print a copy, to prevent Zen students from getting hooked on its literary beauty and failing to realize, not understand, realize its transformative power. This Lingji, Rinzai training text, so impressed Zen Master Dogen, 1200 to 1253, founder of Japan's Soto sect, that legend has it he stayed up his last night in China to hand copy the entire text before returning to Japan in the morning, thereby giving the text he brought back with him to Japan the name, the One Night Hekigan. He was so impressed, he copied it all by hand in one night, stayed up. Of course, ironically, contemporary Soto teachers typically no longer use koans in Doksan, that is the one-to-one encounter, teacher and student. Doksan literally, the word means going alone, without one's usual supports, face the teacher, the koan, and oneself, on one's. It's unfortunate, and I think Soto teachers, unless they've been specifically trained in koan practice, tend to do these days a more literary koan salon. So that is a loss to me of what Dogen actually began with. He had 9 years. Koan practice is his foundation before he even went to China. And he used koans. If you read the Shobogenzo, many of the chapters or fascicles of the Shobogenzo are actually koan commentaries. He just never calls them koan. But if you know Gateless Barrier and you know Hekigan Roku, you'll find that Shobogenzo is made up of terrific koan commentaries by Dogen, who obviously was quite versed in them and used them in his teaching. Now, the case. Carrying his bundle means that Te-shan, as an ordained monk, carried with him in a bundle such necessities as his formal robes, bowing cloth, bowls, utensils, needle and thread, and just enough money to handle a cheap burial should he die on the road. Tradition demanded that newly arrived monks go through a prescribed entrance ritual. First, request a formal interview with the teacher. Once granted, you put on your formal robe. You put down your bowing cloth. You make full prostrations before the teacher. And then, only then, can a dialogue begin. But Te-shan just marches in wearing his worn traveling clothes, monk's bundle unopened, peers aggressively around, with the abbot, a noted teacher seated right there, exclaims, "Nothing, nothing," and charges off again. Why? And why does Te-shan states are 771 to 853, just sit there unmoved, doesn't respond at all. Encounter dialogues, or mondo, question and answer, create a Dharma music, an improvisational Zen jazz. So it goes like there's an opening solo, there's an answering riff, and then it swings back to the initial soloist and continues from there, each musician working off the other, the two or sometimes more, creating a music inaccessible to one performer alone. I prefer this collaborative musical metaphor to the traditional martial one that sees Mundo as a Dharma duel, Dharma combat. So we have two talented musicians here, but their music seems quite muted. Nothing really develops. Quai-Shan just sits quietly. Even when things get lively, he offers no honesty. Is he saying, I'm doing Zazen and can't be bothered? Doing Zazen, he can do what he wants, but I'm not going to be bothered. Is he so deep in samadhi he doesn't notice or care? There's an anecdote supposedly from the life of the Buddha that he was doing Zazen by the side of the road in deep, deep samadhi. A thunderstorm came up and lightning flash came down and shattered a cart being pulled by an ox right beside him. And he didn't notice at all. He was so absorbed. Then didn't make a dent. Is that where Quai-Shan is at? He doesn't even notice what Te-shan is doing? Or is this no response his response? As we know, doing nothing can be a response. So, at their second meeting, he makes a slight move and starts to raise a ritual implement, his fly whisk, which symbolizes his authority and compassion as a teacher because it brushes flies away instead of killing them. So raising his whisk, he says that he's about to take up his formal role as a teacher. Why now? And why does Te-shan shout, "Cuts!" when he sees that, and once again just turns and leaves? When he first entered with his bundle, he looked around and said, "Nothing, nothing." Checking himself and such precipitousness, he returned, started this time anew in proper monastic form. Opens his bundle, takes out his bowing cloth. He's about to do the whole formal ritual. But this too quickly goes awry. Why? What happens? What short circuits? What prevents him from doing the proper entrance ritual and engaging in a dialogue with the teacher? And why again is there so little response from Quai-Shan, who again just Te-shan comes in, starts to make his thing. Quai-Shan raises his whisk. Suddenly, Te-shan is off again. Cuts! And he's gone. Quai-Shan just sits there, watching Te-shan go. A bit of background now on Quai-Shan. In the Transmission of the Lamp, which is a 30-volume work of putative biographies of Zen Buddhist ancestors and prominent monks written in the Song dynasty, so that's after the Golden Age, so-called Song, tells us that Quai-Shan left home at 15 to become a monk. Initially, as was traditional, he studied sutras and the Vinaya, the monastic rules. At 23, he began Zen practice. So that was for 8 years. He was a classical Buddhist, learning the rote, learning the tradition, studying the sutras, studying the regulations. Then at 23, he began Zen practice. After that foundation, that's something that a lot of Westerners who begin Zen practice, a lot of people, I think, begin out of a hope for mindfulness or calm. So we don't start with the Buddhist foundation. We pick that up along the way. which is a really important thing to do to enter into Buddhist tradition, to get in touch with sutras and other teaching, compassionate teaching of the Buddha, is the foundation of Zen practice. But these guys all began with years of that before they even took up Zen. They wanted something more. They wanted to realize what the Buddha was talking about, not just believe in. So, in any case, at 23, he began Zen practice under the guidance of the noted teacher Baichang, that's Yakuja, famous for second koan of the Gateless Barrier, Baichang and the Thought. Eventually becoming, also he created the monastic or monastery rules in terms of, he was noted for creating the rules on which monasteries after Baichang were all made use of. One of his famous dictums was, a day of no work is a day of no eating. So work, remember, monks in India didn't work. They were supported by donation. Monks in China worked. They farmed. That was one of the reasons that Zen survived some of the great oppressions that Buddhism in China, is that they were up in the mountains and they were self-sufficient. He insisted, day of no work, day of no eating. So anyway, that was Bai Chong, and Shan became his leading disciple and heir. So this is the guy who's just sitting there when Te-shan comes through. Anyway, Shan's awakening took place when Bai Chong asked him if there was some spark left in the fireplace. Shan looked and said, "No, there's no more fire." Bai Chong then went to the fireplace and, poking deep among the ashes with metal tongs, lifted a piece of glowing coal, like a spark of coal that was still burning. "Is this not fire?" And that was what opened Shan's realization. Is this not fire? Case 40 of Gateless Barrier, Shan kicks over the water bottle, tells you a little bit about how he got caught becoming head of the monastery that Te-shan went to. So when Shan was studying under Baichang, he worked as the cook, Tenzo, of the monastery. Baichang wanted to choose a founding teacher for Mount Takwe. He summoned the head monk and the rest of the disciples and told them that an exceptional person should go there. Then he took a water bottle, set it on the floor, and said, "Don't call this a water bottle. What do you call it?" The head monk said, "Can't be called a wooden clog." Baichang then asked Shan his opinion. Shan kicked over the water bottle and walked out. Baichang laughed and said the head monk loses. Shan thereupon was made the founding teacher of Mount Takwe. Once he was the teacher at Mount Takwe, he taught for over 40 years, had numerous followers and Dharma heirs, and is said to have passed away smiling in the lotus posture. I thought that was significant, considering the name of the book, Finding Your Buddha Smile. There's Shan, who passed away smiling in the lotus posture. Now, a small incident from his teaching relates that he once said to his monks that after he passed away, he'd return, not as a human being, but as a water buffalo living at the foot of the mountain, and that on the buffalo's left side would be the name Shan. He then asked, "What should I be called, Shan or water buffalo?" What should I be called, Shan or water buffalo? Shan, in other words, was no slouch. Yet in this koan with Te-shan, he hardly makes a move. And why at the conclusion of each of their interactions or non-interactions does Shuedo, compiler of the 100 cases and poems of what later became Blue Cliff Record, respond with? Completely exposed. At the end of the case, Shan learns that Te-shan has turned his back on the Buddha hall and departed. Is there a point to this? Te-shan responds to finding out that Te-shan has turned his back on the Buddha hall, saying, hereafter, that fellow will go to the summit of an isolated peak, establish a hermitage, and scold the Buddhas and abuse the patriarch. Is this praise? A way to prophesy what this lively monk will achieve? Or is Te-shan being critical? Will scold the Buddha and abuse the patriarch. Is it neither? Is it either? Is it both? And why does Shwedo conclude with adding role? Why, in fact, does he even include this story in the collection? How does it? What does it have to do with wisdom and compassion? Or happiness, the point of the Zen smile? Case 46 of the Gateless Barrier, Xishuang stepped forward from the top of the pole. May help. Master Xishuang said, how do you step forward from the top of the pole? Another eminent master of former times said, you who sit on the top of 100-foot pole, although you have entered the way, it is not yet. Take a step from the top of the pole, and the worlds of the 10 directions are your total body. The worlds of the 10 directions are your total body. Something I didn't talk about in this book, a little comment on this. As you know, William Blake, I think, is our great wise man of the West. He has a line in his poem, Milton, where Milton is unhappy in heaven, as the Bodhisattva often is, as king of the gods, chakra. He decides he's got to come back to earth to keep doing good things. So he falls as a meteor to earth and enters Blake's left foot. And Blake then says this incredible line. He says, then I tied on this entire vegetable world like a sandal made of precious, of gold and precious gems to walk forward through eternity. Then I tied on this entire vegetable world like a sandal to walk forward through eternity. To me, that's the same line as, and the worlds of the 10 directions are your entire body. Step from the top of the pole, and the worlds of the 10 directions, your entire body. This is not just a Zen thing. Zen has a language for what is the most universal of all humanity. Blake had to find his own language for it. How he ever did that, I do not know. Man, was he clear about what he was speaking from, fundamental experience. In any case, it takes years of effort, of sacrifice, sweat, and tears to even make it to the top of the 100-foot pole. But is staying up there isolated and vastly alone the point? Vastly alone. Above the heaven, below the heaven, I alone. But is that the point? Staying up there at the top of the pole, is that the point? Shakyamuni got up from under the Bodhi tree. He didn't stay there. And he began teaching, trying to help others realize what he had, which is our own nature, not an. Then again, how do you step from the top of the pole? What is genuineness? What is maturity? What might the final smile as Te-shan passed away from this life say? What is that smile as he sat there in full lotus and died? Tell. In the previous koan, Te-shan carried his backpack hundreds of miles, sure that it contained all the wisdom that he or the world would ever need. By the end of that koan, he'd burned his cherished notes, saying that they added up to no more than drops of water tossed to a vast river. To know all the wisdom and all the secrets of the world, just like a few drops of water tossed compared to the realization of one's own nature, quite compared to realization, experience, own real, all the wisdom of the world swallowed up. Ah, in this koan, having cast off his pointless, useless knowledge, quote Bob Dylan, he carries his sacred monk's bundle hundreds of miles to Te-shan's monastery. Yet, once there, he metaphorically tosses it into that same vast ravine, as if he hardly knew what to do with that bundle. It's like, I don't need this, nothing, nothing. What remains for Te-shan to understand or to do? He acts out. What still remains to work to step from the top of that 100-foot pole? In the third and final koan of Te-shan's life journey, we'll return to the gateless barrier. We've been in Hekiganroka record for this one. In it, Te-shan, now a mature teacher himself, simply carries his ordinary lunch bowls to the dining hall. And yet, well, next chapter, we'll see what happens. Okay, so we will stop there and recite our great vows for all.